You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Filmmaking Conversations with Damian Swaby. Listen to conversations with award-winning filmmakers, directors from the golden age of television, and creatives from the indie film community who continue to inspire the next generation of filmmakers. And now, over to your host, Damian Swaby.
In today's episode, we're joined by a remarkably versatile talent, Ben H. Winters. From creating best-selling novels and genre-bending mashups like Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters, Ben made a daring leap into the world of television, crafting storylines for series such as Legion and Manhunt. Ben's journey is one of triumphs and challenges. Having navigated the distant realms of literature and television success, we'll hear firsthand about the hurdles he's encountered while working on projects like Legion and Manhunt, alongside moments that have defined his career in film and TV. From his early days in punk bands and theatre to making a significant mark in literature and television, Ben's diverse experiences across the whole world have uniquely molded his storytelling voice. This episode promises to offer invaluable insights into navigating the worlds of writing and filmmaking, sharing advice for aspiring creators looking to make their own leap between these interconnected fields. Join us as we delve into the mind of a master storyteller who seamlessly blends genres, tackles adaptation challenges, and continues to shape the future of storytelling. This is an episode packed with wisdom, wonder, and perhaps a window into the future of narrative itself. Hi, Ben. How are you today?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing great. Very happy. Yesterday, I watched an episode of Tracker.
Oh, good. Good.
Put a smile on my face. I love those type of shows, and the one you've put together is really, really good, which we'll talk about soon. That's for sure during the podcast. And really happy to have you on. I'm, looking at your website and reading about all the work you've done. I find it really fascinating that you're a writer and you've been in a punk band, and now you're working on stuff for television, which is like you're like a real creative with many creative juices flowing in you, and you're telling stories and getting things out there. So how did you get the feeling, and how did you start being a creative? What got everything together for you to put your creative juices out there?
Oh, well, I mean, I think like a lot of people who are in some way creative or artistically expressive, in some way, I always wanted to do it. And for me, when I was younger, I was always a lot of performance. Like you said, I was in a band when I was in middle school and high school and that whole period of my life. And I also did a lot of theater, acting and stuff like that. And then in college, I did performance, comedy, theater, all kinds of stuff, like goofy stuff, and made music. I was always in bands. And then at a certain point, I think I realized I was not really made for the stage. I wasn't really a born performer, but I knew that I loved the writing aspect of it. I had always loved writing songs. I had loved writing plays and jokes and everything. And I just started at some point. I guess the first phase of my career as a writer was in the theater. I was writing plays and musicals. So that's sort of how it started for me. It was my first sort of fumbling attempts to express myself artistically were as a performer. And then at a certain point, I was like, I'm not really a performer, and I should be writing. And I found the joy in it, and that somehow I managed to stumble into a career.
When did it get to the point when you thought, I'm not a performer? Was it something you thought yourself, or was it a case of people said, Ben, I'm sorry to tell you?
No. It was before I got to that point. I think I was, I guess I had been doing a lot of stand-up comedy stuff. This is a long time ago, and I realized that I didn't have the discipline to really to spend my life on stage and to sort of figure out how to like succeed in that. It's just it's tough, not that it's easy to be a writer, but I don't know. I think I just, once I started writing, I think I found so much pleasure in it and so much more satisfaction that I sort of quickly transitioned. Yeah. So I don't know if there was ever a moment so much as just a slow coming to realize who I really was, I guess.
Certainly. And stand-up performing, what type of stand-up were you? Slapstick, satire, mime? What were your
Oh,
elements of?
goofy. No. I was just doing real jokes, like dumb jokes. This was in Chicago a long, long time ago, right after college. Um, and I had done improv comedy in school and then moved to Chicago and done some stuff in that world. But then I also started writing. I was working for an independent newspaper there. So I think it was always a balance of those two things, of writing and performing. And then slowly, and then I guess when I moved to New York, I was writing musicals with a guy, and so I really transitioned then out of the performance and acting side into the writing. Um, Sort of, it's funny to think back on all this stuff. It always seems as if there's some plan, but of course there's no plan. You're just
Yeah.
stumbling through it, you know?
Stumbling through it. I completely understand what you mean. And transitioning from later on, when you transitioned from best-selling novels and mashups like Sense and Sensibility and Sea Monsters to engaging storylines in TV series like Legion and Manhunt is quite a leap. Could you share with us what inspired the shift and how your background in novel writing influenced your approach in screenwriting?
Yes. If you see me looking off camera, Damien, it's because I'm engaging with my dog to make sure he doesn't freak out. He's doing great.
Okay,
Um,
great.
yeah. You're like, is he, does someone have cue cards over there? No. Uh, it's such a journey. It's such a journey. And I basically, the short answer is that I was lucky enough that a couple of times novels of mine had been optioned for television, uh, enough so that I was intrigued by how that process worked and what it meant. And there's this funny thing that the first time it happens, you sort of go, oh, well, now this is great. I made it. My ship has come in. They've optioned this book. It's going to be on television. And then, in fact, what usually happens is it's optioned and then someone might play around with it, but then nothing actually happens. There's no script, or there's a script, but there's no production, or there's a production, but there's no show. So I was curious about the process. I had a little bit of a gut feeling that this is something I could do myself if I tried, which is to write a television script. So I sort of started making inquiries in that direction. Um, and I found myself a TV agent, and I wrote a script, not based on one of my, but whatever. I sort of started pushing that way. Um, and then I did indeed enjoy a little bit of success, enough so that I thought, okay, I can try to do both things and sort of expand my professional portfolio. So I'm still writing books, but I'm also going to try to write for TV. And it took some doing. And I've had sort of a strange career in TV because I didn't, most people who work in television professionally start their careers at a sort of low level in TV as an assistant or whatever, and then they get a staff job and then they work their way up. Whereas I came into it sort of out of left field as a successful novelist coming into this world. So most of my work has been at a sort of artificially high level of selling ideas for shows, writing pilot scripts. But then I was lucky enough to get a gig on that show Legion, which was super fun, and Manhunt, which was really fun, and sort of learn the ropes that way.
Excellent. And your work spans a variety of genres and formats, from Golden State to the psychological depth in the brilliant CBS drama Tracker, which I said earlier, which is a great show. Could you walk us
Thanks.
through your creative process for developing stories for television compared to crafting a novel?
Yeah, I'm so bad at looking at my own creative process. It's like I don't know, but I think that in broad strokes, what distinguishes television writing from fiction writing is that, well, there's a couple things. That the format is so much more strictly defined in TV, particularly writing something like Tracker, which is an hour-long procedural show where every episode, our hero is embroiled in a mystery or thriller plot, and he must survive it and solve the case or save the girl or whatever it is within the scope of that 45 minutes of screen time. So there are more boundaries, there are more rules and sort of restrictions of what you can and can't do. Add to that the fact that in general you are working with a lot of other people, meaning other writers, meaning studio executives, meaning just a whole cast and crew. So it's so much less of a solitary art form. Part of the struggle, but also the joy of fiction writing is that you sell an idea or you don't, you just start it, and it's just you. For most of the time, it is just you. And then at some point you engage with an editor. And if you're lucky enough to sell the book, there's, those levels of creative feedback. And then but it's just you. And like,
Yeah.
which is exciting and scary and a huge challenge. And in TV, it's not just you. There's only a very brief moment where it's just you have an idea maybe and you take a first stab at it. But then as soon as you get into a conversation with other writers, with a potential director, with a star, then all of it begins to shift, and you have to start to accommodate and find the points where you go, well, no, this, we have to keep this. This is the heart of the story. So it's just it's much more about politics and personalities than fiction writing ever is, which is both good and bad.
I completely understand the shift from being just you to such a huge team and a huge machine is very, very different. I can understand that. But that being said, how do you approach character development, plot structure, and pacing across these different mediums?
Oh, well, I mean, what's interesting with TV is that the development of a character is in general something that is spread out over, multiple episodes, so it's like characters have minor shifts in who they are, but especially in traditional television storytelling, sitcoms or hour-long drop procedurals, the audience expects the character to remain fairly predictable and who they are with only minor shifts over many, many, many episodes, because they're returning to that show because they've fallen in love with the character being a certain thing and they want the character to remain that thing. Whereas I think that successful fiction in general, you want the character to experience some great change or movement in who they are and how they relate to the world over the course of the book, right? The character changes the world and the world changes the character. You want to see that. That's part of the joy of reading a great book. So I think oftentimes, if I'm thinking about a TV show, I might think, okay, over the course of the series, this character will go from X to Y. But over the course of any individual episode, it's much more about what is the mystery inherent in this particular story? How does our hero use their special skills to solve this mystery, or whatever the case may be? But yeah, I think in either case, you are smart as a writer to be thinking about both things at once. What are the sort of logistical challenges of this event, in the world of the book, but also what is the character movement? And you want to be thinking about those two things in either medium, in any medium you're working in.
So what do you look for in a character? Let's say the lead character in Tracker, for example. What do you look for when you're thinking about likability in a character?
Well, likability is complicated. I mean, you definitely want there to be something that is, it's funny. I guess it's one way to say it is that there's something that the character needs, that the audience senses that they need, that the character isn't necessarily conscious of or willing to admit to themselves. So there's something that the audience feels that if they pay attention, if they stick with this character, if they watch them, there'll be something they're after, that they're trying to heal about themselves, say, that we're going to be rooting for them to do over the course of this story, over the course of the years of this show or whatever. Like, I just think that's what's interesting about people, is that we're not whole. We're looking to change, whether we know it or not. So I think that's, I personally, my taste and the kind of characters I write in my fiction and on television, I'm drawn to characters that are in the process of, that aren't perfect, that aren't like fully formed, that aren't super heroic, that are flawed and have, things they're trying, or the things that are not perfect, that they need to get better at. And that so we can watch them grow toward those things, whether it's emotional things or like, skill sets that they don't have.
Sure, that all makes sense, and I think I'm seeing some of that in Tracker for sure. In the lead character, what does he want? His need for growth, whether he knows it or not. So that's really interesting to hear you say that, for that to come from you. And having achieved success in both literature and television, could you discuss some of the challenges you faced while working on shows like Legion and Manhunt?
Oh, well, I mean, what's funny about both Legion and Manhunt are, so Legion was created by Noah Hawley, who's this great genius who created Fargo and lots of other amazing TV stuff. He's working on Alien now. And Manhunt was the project of a friend of mine named Monica Beletsky, who's also an incredible talent. And so with both of those shows, they were what you would almost call like auteur driven. Like they were the creation of one person who had this grand idea, and then which is often how television works these days, was creating this group of other writers to help them deliver that vision. So I was sort of proud on both of those shows to be sort of one piece of this larger puzzle, that you are trying to kind of not necessarily be brilliant in terms of defining what the show is, but what you're trying to do is figure out what the creator needs and deliver that to them. Be a part of this larger mind, which is its own sort of exciting challenge. Tracker is a little different because as a sort of big procedural drama for CBS, it is this like, it's much more of, we're building this machine to deliver this specific kind of entertainment. It's a little bit less esoteric and more just like, boom, every week it's boom. He's got and I was part of that machine. Like the book it's based on a book, which is not one of mine. It was based on a book that the director and the star had found this book. They wanted to create this show based on this book. They needed a writer to come in and craft a pilot that would deliver that. So I was the person who did that. So kind of forgot what the question was, but like, yes, it's like every show has its own unique challenges or problems that are trying to be fixed or solved.
Could you share a moment or an aspect of your TV work that you've been particularly proud of?
Well, I am particularly proud of the pilot script for Tracker because that show, there had been other attempts at it. They'd had the book for a little while. They knew they wanted to do this show. The network was excited about it, but no one could quite figure out how to take that book and turn it into an hour of television that would introduce this character. And I was able to do that. I sort of came in and said, I think I see it here. I think what you need to do is kind of forget about the plot of this novel a little bit, not forget about it, but sort of put it in the background and really focus on this character, figure out a story that will showcase him in an interesting way. And I was able to do that in such a way that the network said, yes, this is it. Let's make this show. So that was a huge accomplishment. From there, it gets trickier because then you're trying to deliver the week-to-week show, and a showrunner was brought in. It turns into like a whole different, like I said, it's a machine. But I was very proud of that moment of going, okay, I think I cracked this,
And when you put together a script for the pilot, how long would that take? And how many drafts would we be talking about?
I think probably between the first concept and the script that was actually shot, it was probably 4 or 5 drafts. First, there's an outline, and then the outline goes through drafting, and then there's the script, and the script gets rewritten and rewritten. So 4 or 5 drafts. And I think between getting the gig and shooting the pilot, it was about 6 months, something like that. It was actually a relatively fast development process. A lot of times, television development can take forever, particularly for cable or streaming when there's no sort of there's no schedule. It's just like, okay, we like this idea. We'll just develop it for however long it takes. And you get all these rounds and rounds of notes, and it can really stretch out. But this was a relatively fast process.
So you've been an actor, a stand-up comedian, you've written novels and a screenwriter, and you've been in a punk band. How have these experiences and these diverse creative projects and things you've done shaped your voice as a storyteller?
I think everything that you do, whether or not you know it, is teaching you what your voice is. And I think it would be hard for me to say what the connection is between song lyrics I was writing when I was 13 and stand-up bits I was writing when I was 20 and books I was writing when I was 40. It's all. I think what you don't think about when you're younger is the professional aspect, that you are not just writing to express yourself. If you are serious about it, you need to be writing in order to find creative partners, to find people who will be willing to put down money, to sort of bet on you, to pay you an advance or a spec script or whatever it is. Like, you're trying to build a career. And the difference between creating for yourself in a vacuum to sort of just express some artistic idea and creating as part of a professional life, there is a difference. And it takes a lot of time and sort of maneuvering to figure out how to both have a unique voice that belongs to you and also try to be satisfying a marketplace. And like, those are hard lessons to learn, and it takes some time. That doesn't really answer your question so much as to say, like, when I think back, the difference is probably that when I was younger, I didn't really care or think about those things. But now at this point in my career, as a middle-aged man with a family and a mortgage, it's like you can't afford to be too married to ideas that won't have any life in the market, that are just sort of, you think they're cool. You are beholden to a sort of level of professionalism, which doesn't mean you shouldn't shoot for the stars. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be thinking about the sort of big ideas that are meaningful to you, but you need to also be aware that you're going to have to try to sell those ideas in a room, whether it's to an editor or to a studio or whoever. So yeah, trying to think about that connection between the marketplace and your sort of creative vision is one of the hardest things to learn. And I'm not sure that I've learned it yet.
That's an excellent answer, actually. I think a lot of us can learn from that, the marketplace and having your voice and saying, this is my creative journey, but without having someone being able to kind of bet on you and say, well, here's an advance or here's what's it not, then you're probably going to run into some problems in the future. That's for sure. What exactly were you in your punk band? I never asked. Sorry, were you the singer, the lead guitar?
No, bass player.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wrote lyrics. I was the
Nice
bass
one.
player, and I wrote lyrics. Yeah, I wasn't good. It was a pretty good band, but not because of me. And actually, one of the members of the band went on to have a pretty decent career in music. I mean, yeah, it was really fun. It was more of just like, this is a great way to. I love my friends, and this is a great way to hang out with my friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That was
definitely. You 4-string or 5-string bass?
4-string.
Nice,
Yeah.
classic. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. So, can you share an example with us from your work on Legion and Manhunt, when you had to blend genres together and that played a key role in the stories?
Oh, well, I mean, Manhunt in particular, and this is no credit to me, it's all credit to Monica who created the show. What's smart about Manhunt is that it combines genres. Like, it is a historical piece. It's about Abraham Lincoln, it's about Reconstruction, it's about the end of the Civil War, but it plays as a thriller, right? It's about the hunt for John Wilkes Booth after the assassination of Lincoln. So it's very, very smart in that it takes the sort of elements of a thriller, but uses them to tell a story that is about something important. So like these big ideas about what was going on in America at that time. And what's cool is that it was a great gig for me, because that's always what I've tried to do in my work, in my fiction especially, is use the kind of tropes of mystery, thriller, and science fiction to tell stories that might have something more meaningful to say. Like my book Underground Airlines was about racism in America and the history of anti-Black prejudice in this country, but it's not. Hopefully, it isn't preachy. It works because it is a thriller, and so to use forms of popular entertainment to tell stories that might have something more meaningful to say is something that I'm very committed to. So that's part of why Manhunt was so fun for me. It was such a powerful experience.
And are you able to, and I'm sure you are, but I kind of have to ask, are you able to kind of really write more than one show at a time and also write a book? How is the writing process for you?
I tend to have multiple things going. I think, and actually it goes back to your question, or what I was saying about the marketplace. Like, I think sometimes it is tempting to say, well, I'm just going to work on this thing till it's done. But in a world where you never know what's going to sell and what isn't going to sell, you never know if something's going to hit or not. I think it is wise to have multiple projects that you're thinking about or working on at any given time, so that you're always ready with the next thing if something doesn't work out. Or if something does work out and people go, oh, wow, what else are you working on? You're like, okay, well, I got this and this and this. So I tend to be, even as Tracker is now winding down season 1, and I think I'm trying to develop a show based on my most recent book. I have an original idea I'm trying to write. I am working on the next book. So on any given day, I'm kind of bouncing around. But then with any of these projects, at a certain point, if you're lucky enough that someone's interested in it and wants to, get someone going with it, then you focus on that thing to the exclusion of other things so that you can deliver it properly.
And having multiple projects and having things on the go, you said you're always on the go. What type of discipline do you have for yourself? Like, what does an 8-hour day look like, or a 12-hour day? I don't know how many hours a day you would work.
I wish. Well, I I try to block out 3 or 4 hours in the morning to just be writing once the kids are at school and I'm able to focus. So, and then there's always, well, if you're lucky enough to be pitching a project, there's meetings and calls and all that stuff. Earlier in this year, when the Tracker writers room was still going, there was a lot of, it takes hours and hours. But if I don't have anything that is active and I'm just writing, if I'm just writing, I try to be working 3 to 4 hours in the morning. So I'm just writing. And then in the afternoons, if I'm lucky enough to grab a couple more hours, but otherwise I can be doing phone calls, emails, and all that crap. And then, or even if I'm just like, if I'm burned out for the day, I will try to read for an hour. Like because whatever book I'm doing, I try to have different kind of things that I'm reading, which kind of funnel into the book, whether it's research or similar, precedential work, other books that I think would have an interesting impact on it. So I try to like, if I feel like I can't write anymore, but I don't want to just like give up for the day, then I'll just turn to reading. That's like very perfect world, The problem is the stupid internet. There's always stuff you can be doing that isn't working,
Yeah, that's completely true. Could sometimes go down a rabbit hole I find myself doing. And
it's the worst.
your influences as a writer, do you have any? Is there anyone and it might not be a writer, it could be a family member or a friend, someone who really inspires you?
Well, I have plenty of influences, literary influences. I like to think, it's in the classics, John le Carré and Agatha Christie and, Patricia Highsmith and some of the contemporaries who are writing who I love, like Megan Abbott, Tana French, and I mean, tons and tons of people. But in my life, I have a lot of friends who are also writers in fiction or in television, and I have found that it is useful to frequently engage and have lunches or coffees and just talk about work, both the frustrations of the business, but also the kind of fun stuff that people are working on. It's easy sometimes to be isolated when you're a writer and just go, okay, well, I'm going to work all week. I don't need to see anybody. I'm just focused. But then, being isolated can be productive, but it can also be kind of depressing and enervating. And it's inspirational to just make the social round and see what other people are doing and be reminded that you're not the only person working in this mine, that like it's other people might be facing the same frustrations that you are, casting about as you are. And so I've tried, especially lately, to like make a point of connecting with other artists and just see what other people are doing and like hanging out a little bit,
With technology and viewer habits continuously evolving, the landscape of television and film is changing rapidly. So based on your experience in both traditional novel writing and screenwriting for TV, where do you see the future of storytelling heading in the next decade, particularly in terms of television and streaming content? What trends or innovations excite you the most?
I have no idea. I mean, I feel like anybody who thinks they have an idea does not really have an idea. I mean, I like to think that the television business will continue apace and that, there will continue to be a vast national and international audience for new work on TV. I think there is some skepticism in some quarters that the business model will remain as it is now. I think there was this sort of flourishing in the 2000s, what they called peak TV and these huge shows that still managed to draw big audiences. I think that there's a lot of competition from smaller screens. We can't pretend there isn't, that people are just, why would I sit down and watch an hour-long thing when I can watch a 2-minute video on YouTube and go about my day, So we'll see. I think we'll see as younger audiences grow up, if they have been taught to not be as interested in long-form entertainment, we'll just sort of see what happens, I certainly like to believe that, people will always have a need or an interest in substantive, richly interesting long form entertainment, whether it's a movie or an hour-long series or a novel. I like to think that there will always be an audience for that. Whether it remains at the level it is now, I just have no idea. I cannot say.
And when you're settled at home and you want to watch something on the television, what type of shows do you watch?
I watch the shows that get a lot of buzz that other people watch. I hear about a show and I try to keep up on things. I like mysteries. I do. I sometimes I think that television. Sorry, my dog. Sometimes I think that the dramas that are a little. It's funny. I write kind of dark stuff. I don't always like to watch stuff that's very grim or bleak, or I tend to sometimes I just like to watch comedy specials. If I'm writing murder stuff and like scary stuff all day, I'm like, well, I just want to kind of watch stuff that's a little easier. You know what I mean? A little easier to get through. But I like The Bear. Like I like. I've been enjoying Ripley on Netflix. I love the books, the Talented Mr. Ripley series so much, and I think they've done a really good job with it. I'm always impressed by a very faithful a book to show adaptation. It's amazing to me to see how people figure out how to do it. So I'm liking that one very much.
And what advice would you give to upcoming writers and filmmakers who wish to work in film and television? And are there certain skills or mindsets they should cultivate to excel in?
Yeah, it's contrary. I think two very contrary pieces of advice. One is to be very collaborative, meaning to be very willing and enthusiastic about working with others and hearing other people's ideas and negotiating in a diplomatic and way about creating something together. But on the other hand, knowing what the value is of your own idea and not being too willing to give it up. If you have something that is good, then take that stand, because it's also possible to compromise something into being bad, and to letting the worst ideas win. So,
okay, well, Ben, thanks so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing more from you, and I'm sure I will.
It's my pleasure. Very nice to talk to you, Damon. Thank you. This is cool.